Well, Eric, joining us now for more is retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Robert Maginnis. Colonel Maginnis, thank you for joining us. And so how does allowing Ukraine to strike Russia with U.S. supplied weapons change the Ukraine-Russia war?
Well, Arthel is probably going to enrage Putin, which, of course, is problematic. Keep in mind, the intelligence community, according to the New York Times, recently said that Ukraine is losing the war. Now, we know that Zelensky, as you just reported, has come to the United States weeks ago with a victory plan. And allegedly, when he met with President Biden, he made it very clear that using ATACMS and other long-range missiles, such as what the French and the UK just released, will be helpful. Now, unfortunately, it's a possibility that this could likely broaden the war. Now, keep in mind, the Chinese are allegedly providing lethal aid now to Russia. The Iranians have, and of course, as you just reported, the North Koreans have sent upward to 10,000 troops to Russia, allegedly that are going to be in the eastern provinces helping in the fight against Kursk. So you have a host of issues here. Allowing them to use HIMARS ATACMS that can reach 188 miles inside of Russia could be incredibly problematic.
Well, also, here's another question. Is there enough time for Ukraine to take advantage of these long-range missiles in the next 64 days, enough to put Russia and the North Koreans on their heels?
Unlikely. ATACMS are not going to make a major difference, quite frankly. What it will do is put Mr. Trump, as he assumes the presidency, in a much worse situation because the Russians, like I said, have been enraged. And so you have a series of things that have happened, Arthel. Mr. Biden, in fact, thought that the war in Ukraine was going to bolster our industrial base. It didn't. And he also was hoping that it would degrade the Russian military. Unfortunately, what Vladimir Putin has done is upgrade his industrial base to produce more munitions. And he is, just increasing his selective service to bring more people into the ranks, to include, of course, the North Koreans. So you have the makings of a much broader war. So we need to be incredibly careful here about allowing Zelensky's so-called victory plan to go forward in a way that could just rob us all of our future freedoms.
Well, okay, you said that Putin's reaction has already been to increase his forces. Well, he's taking North Korean forces, so he's not that impressive. So his military is wounded by the smaller, mightier Ukraine. That said, listen, as we said, in 64 days, Trump will be the U.S. president. How do you think Trump's military advisors will guide him?
Well, it's going to take a while to bring them aboard. Clearly, Waltz and, perhaps Pete Hegseth and others will be able to advise him to go slow. Mr. Trump's already made it clear, Arthel, that he wants to get out of this war, wants Ukraine to have peace in the future. And I think that the statements over the weekend by Vladimir Putin suggesting that, he's ready to talk in a matter of speaking. And Zelensky has said as much as well. What we don't need to do at this late hour in the Biden administration is exacerbate a pretty bad situation that perhaps has a chance of resolving itself in a peaceful way in the near future. I think all of us want peace. What we don't want, obviously, is the total occupation of Ukraine by the Russians and more killing. And that's unfortunately what's happening.
But is there any way to look at it from this other perspective, which is, sure, it's going to poke the bear, it's going to make Putin more angry and angrier and more fierce as he can be. But what's the other side of this? Because this agreement that could happen in the next 64 days or so means that Ukraine has to once again give up territory to Russia. So, how is that just a great move?
Yeah. This is a bad situation for all involved. I do believe with the Russian parliament having already accepted the 4 provinces of eastern Ukraine as part of its kingdom, and what Vladimir Putin has made very clear is he's not going to give away anything. And in fact, over the last few weeks, he's redefined his own nuclear doctrine in such a way that he says very explicitly that a joint attack by a non-nuclear state such as Ukraine, backed by a nuclear state such as the United States, will in fact allow him, if he so decides, to use tactical
He's not
nuclear
going to do that.
weapons. I don't
He
think
won't.
he's going to do that.
You know that, Colonel. He's not going to.
But,
right. So let me ask you this. Yeah.
But Arthel, he's been boasting about that for years. I understand that, but they had exercises here recently in Belarus with those same tactical nuclear weapons. He also has had exercises in the northeast or the northwest part of his country talking about these things. Putin is a rational player, but at the same time, Putin is very hegemonic about not allowing NATO's encroachment into Ukraine and further east. And as a result, I do believe that Putin will draw a line there. And unfortunately, we've been playing around with the idea of allowing NATO membership to come to Ukraine. And that, I think, is a red line which might exacerbate the current problem.
Well, this is definitely a new wrinkle, a big wrinkle, a conundrum, if you will, for sure. So let me ask you, with all of this now at play, could this move prompt President-elect Trump to reconsider some of his cabinet picks, like Defense Secretary, Secretary of State, Homeland Security, DNI? I don't know. I'm just asking you, sir.
Quite possibly, only because you need people with deep European experience, people that understand the Ukrainian culture, that understand the Polish culture. Those nations, are in a very tenuous situation, Arthel, as are the Baltics, as are the Nordic countries. They're ramping up for war. They believe that's inevitable. And so we need people that are advising the president that have firsthand knowledge about what is going on in that eastern area and really trying to get in the head of Vladimir Putin, which is incredibly difficult, much less in President Xi's head, who I would argue is sort of manipulating some of what's going on with Russia. After all, if he's willing to provide lethal aid and buy up all the extra energy that Putin is willing to sell, then he's fully supporting what he's doing. And that sends a very bad message. And no wonder the Europeans are nervous in the service.
It's a lot to keep an eye out on. Retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Robert Maginnis, thank you very much for your analysis and your expertise. And thank you for joining us, sir. We'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.